Hello everybody, GamerZ here, and today we're going to go over a video by XMOS Gaming. In this video, XMOS talks about why consoles are easier to develop for than PCs are, and in that regard, why consoles are still relevant. There's really nothing more to say than, well, I disagree. I thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy.
Stop!
Sig Heil!
Before you hit that dislike button, just hear me out. This is not what you think it is. We all know that PC can push graphics to the limit and is much better for gaming overall, especially for first-person shooters. We all know that. And no, I do not wish to debate that here. However, there is something that makes consoles more appealing to the gaming industry.
Perfect. Let's roll the credits and just end here. I thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Just kidding.
However, there is something that makes consoles more appealing to the gaming industry, especially for developers. That is what I'm going to talk about in this video, so sit back and relax. Basically, what I want to talk about is something that I keep seeing everywhere, and that is the discussion of which one is better and all that PC can do what consoles can't. But most people that argue that seem to think that we all have the money to buy a graphic card whenever some new game comes out. And of course, we do not.
I thought you were just talking about the ease of development. Now you just went into price. Okay, let's try to ignore that, except for the fact that you can just buy an RX 560 and that'll do you just fine for about $120. Which, might I add, is quite a bit cheaper than consoles. But I digress, as does he.
I know there are a lot of passionate gamers out there that will say that PC is the master race and consoles suck. But then again, this video is not for that. This is a discussion for developers.
Alrighty then, let's get to that, don't you think?
Now, I don't want to generalize things here, that is not my goal, but the graphic card thing is what I wanted to talk about.
Well, you can't just say people think we can afford graphics cards and not be generalizing. You also can't say we can't afford new graphics cards and expect to not be generalizing. If you didn't want to generalize, then you should address facts. Because at the end of the day, all subjective arguments could be general.
The problem that a lot of different cards and overall PC setup present as a challenge to any developer, and that is what is appealing about consoles.
Well, that was one big gobblegoo of a sentence. So basically what you're saying is that customizability is a bad thing because it hinders the development of games? What's funny to me though is that everyone who says this has no idea what DirectX, OpenGL, Vulkan, or other softwares similar to that do. And we'll get into that in a bit.
I am basing this on what developers have to say, not just me. Just take a look at what Jonathan Blow, the creator of Braid and Witness, said about making games for computers.
Code or whatever.
I have stayed away from reading that kind of stuff on the internet, in part because we've been really busy just doing support for people, and because like on the PS4 you don't really need that much support because it's a stable platform and all that, but on the PC, man, it's crazy. So that's been my entire job since the game came out, and almost everybody's entire job.
Right. Is there a lot left to, or do you feel like there's a lot left to do there in terms of?
It's getting reasonable. But now
I saw you were out buying video cards.
Oh God,
and through all that.
So we've been
stuff,
doing all that video card stuff, and now we're at the point of like, okay, we're getting some features in that would be good to have. Like, okay, we just patched in like a reticle for people who are getting motion sick and stuff, which
Oh boy, do I have a lot to say about what just happened. The most obvious thing that I have to say though is that this is one developer. You've provided one example of one developer bitching about developing for the PC. A second thing is Jonathan talked about how he got a bunch of video cards to test out the game, I guess. But I guess the most important thing that he just had to talk about was patching in a reticle for people who were getting motion sickness. Motion sickness, of all things. This has nothing to do with the hardware of the computer or anything like that, patching in little bits of code to optimize for other setups. He never talked about that. All he talked about was patching in a reticle for people who had motion sickness. I mean, maybe you can blame it on the fact that his mind was blanking out and he couldn't remember how many times he had to actually optimize for different setups. Well, what I'm thinking he did was he never actually had to optimize for specific sets of hardware. That's what DirectX is for. That's what OpenGL is for, and that's what Vulkan is for. People install that on their computers as an interpreter for games that are using DirectX, OpenGL, or Vulkan, or some other software. and that they use that interpreter to translate to the hardware exactly what to do, no matter the setup of your hardware. That said, you're not buying every single part on the market and developing for those specific parts. You pick one of those interpreter softwares, like DirectX for example, you code for that, and then require that people download that version of DirectX that you coded for. It seems that a lot of people confuse what optimization is. It's not the requirement that you have to optimize for every single part on the market in order for those people with different parts to be able to play the game without it breaking. Optimization is the ability to put more in a game without demanding more hardware. It's the ability to put 1,000,000 different polygons in an instance and be able to run it at 120 FPS versus 500,000 polygons in an instance and being able to run at only 30. That's what optimization is. But if you want to talk about incompatible parts, well then that's another story. That has nothing to do with optimizing the game. That's just the lack of DirectX or OpenGL or Vulkan or the specific custom software that the engine is using to translate to all possible hardware setups. I could go more in detail in this and go all nerdy and whatever, but I figured I've wasted enough of your time. Optimization has nothing to do with incompatible parts. But this is hardly a problem with things like DirectX or OpenGL out there, because nowadays, that work is done for you.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what I want to talk about. At first hand, the variety of graphic cards that PC offers to us is great, but that is not true to the developers. It may be great for PC enthusiasts, but not for developers.
Here's the deal. If a developer wants to make a CPU-intensive or graphically intensive game, then they're going to be developing for the higher end of the spectrum of hardware, okay? They're not going to be developing for lower end hardware because that's going to hold them back. It's like developing for consoles. For example, Just Cause 3 was not meant to be played on your grandma's 1998 computer. The only problem that faces developers is that they know only a minority of PC gamers have really high-end graphics cards, which makes them compelled to develop for medium-tier or lower-tier hardware. With that said, of course, only a select few sets of hardware are going to run that game, because you need higher-end hardware to run that game. When developers optimize the game, that's when it becomes available for lower-end hardware.
Just like he mentioned there, every time you make a game, you literally have to spend countless hours to fix graphics and compatibility issues.
He actually never specifically talked about compatibility issues at all.
That is actually one of the most problematic things in terms of releasing games for PC. The huge variety of cards, and not only new ones, but outdated ones as well. They end up creating this nightmarish problem for all developers, and most of the time a huge chunk of the earning goes to this one problem alone. So if you expect to make loads of money with your game, you also have to expect that you will have to invest on a team just to make sure that your game is compatible with a lot, and I mean a lot of graphic cards.
No, that's not the case at all. When you develop a game for the PC, all you have to think about is your target audience. Are you targeting higher-end hardware? Are you targeting the majority of hardware? I mean, of course, NVIDIA graphics cards from 2001 still exist, and probably people still use them, but does that mean you have to keep them in mind when you make your game? No, that's going to castrate your development. That's going to totally put a cap on what you're able to do. With so many graphics cards out there, only a few people have the highest of the high. Now, with that said, of course your target audience is going to be in the majority, which means you have to keep in mind somewhat lower-end hardware. That doesn't mean you have to keep in mind graphics cards from 1995. It just means you need to keep track of the modern-day hardware and know what the modern-day hardware can put up with.
Since the PC market is by far the largest market for gaming, this is something that anybody that wants to make games has to consider before they start. And this is where I think consoles excel. Consoles offer a very elegant solution to the problem because after all, it's not really that expensive, it gets the job done, and you don't have to optimize your game for many cards.
But here's the problem that developers face on consoles. You're limited to one specific set of hardware, which we've already established by now is pretty shit. So pretend you want to make a game like Battlegrounds. Large open map, 3 million polygons, tons of objects, 100 players, things like that. Well, if you really want to develop this game, I don't think you would choose Xbox or PS4, because you're pretty fucked if that hardware can't actually do what you want it to do. Which, of course, it's not going to do. So your alternative is to develop for the PC. Now granted, you're not targeting a big majority audience because it's going to be a very intensive game, but at least it can still be done. In other words, you're developing for specifically higher-end hardware, thus optimizing for higher-end hardware.
Once it's done, it's done. You have to fix bugs and other things, but there won't be any graphic optimization for graphic cards.
Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, it seems. It's not after the game that people come out with graphics options and optimizations. While you're making the game, you come up with that shit. When GTA 5 was released, it already had the ability to change graphical options. When Dirty Bomb was released, it already has graphical options. This doesn't get added later. This is already put into the game. And it's during the stage of development that you figure out what your target audience is going to be based on how intensive you plan the game to be.
And yes, I can already see the comments on this video. But consoles barely play games in 60 frames per second, PC can do better and blah blah blah. No, that is not the point.
No, it isn't. You're either limited by one specific set of hardware, which is consoles, or you're able to develop whatever game you want given that you know what your target audience is.
Like I said before, the gaming industry needs to solve this problem, and I'll bet you that every big company is realizing right now that make games for PC doesn't really make that much profit.
Wow, are you kidding me? Tell me why PC gaming makes more annual revenue than console gaming does. If PC can make around $35 million a year and consoles can't even half that, then why is PC gaming not profitable?
After all, GTA 5 sold really well on consoles only for a long time.
Yes, GTA 5 did do really well on consoles. Over 11 million copies sold in 24 hours. Now, just because GTA 5 didn't sell as many copies on PC as it did on consoles doesn't mean it wasn't successful. It sold 2 million copies in under a month. One thing you have to consider with that though, it took almost 2 years to get it released on PC. A lot of PC gamers, including myself, just went ahead and bought it for console. Because the PC release was 2 years after the release of PS3, I'm already progressed so far into the GTA 5 on PS3, why would I buy GTA 5 on my computer? Not a lot of gamers are going to buy into the double dipping scheme that a lot of developers try to do. To be fair, Rockstar didn't mean to double dip, since GTA 5 is a huge game, but they kinda did. But since they didn't remake the game from scratch, it didn't cost them a lot of money to make the game for PC, and they made a profit off of it. It's not like nobody buys games on PC, because the market on PC is huge.
And one of the reasons that I believe that they delayed on delivering the game for PC was exactly the problem that they were having in solving compatibility issues. Because GTA 5 is the one example of a game that can use memory and graphics in a very efficient way. Otherwise, you would not be able to play the game.
No, you would be able to play the game, you would just need really good hardware. Oh, what am I talking about? They optimized it for the PS3, right? They optimized it for the Xbox 360. They optimized it for the current gen consoles. It took a year for Rockstar to port GTA 5 from the PS3 and Xbox 360 to the current gen consoles. I think it makes a lot of sense why GTA 5 took a year to be ported to PC. The PC version had way better graphics, the PC version was released with first-person mode, and that was on top of just porting the original game. So yeah, it makes sense that it took a year. It's a big game.
And this is not only about consoles. Apple is a good example of this. They solved this when they entered the mobile market. The idea of giving the ability to developers to create an app or a game that was already optimized to be used in any device was something that really worked well for the company, hence why their app store thrived with casual games and all. On the other hand, you had Samsung and other companies that all offered a huge variety of phones, and all of them had different operating systems and whatnot. So making apps for them was pretty much a nightmare.
You know this how? I have an Android, it cost me $10. As you can imagine, it's pretty shit. With that being said, even though I have a very strange operating system and a very strange runtime environment, I'm still able to download and play many games that other phones can play as well. If you look in an app's requirements section in its description, very similar to PC, You can easily tell in the app's description how much hardware you need in order to run the game, and if your hardware isn't up to par, then don't download the game. But for many of these, it's not that I can't play the game, because I can download and play any app on the App Store. The problem is, though, that it's super slow on my phone. And this isn't the dev's fault, it's my phone's fault. My phone just isn't powerful enough to run that app. I don't know where you're getting this, it's a nightmare to develop on Android information, but it's just like coding for DirectX. It takes no work to tell the hardware what to do, because the job's already being done for you by DirectX or OpenGL or Vulkan.
Just ask any developer prior to 2015 on how hard it was to make apps for Android. Not only from the programming standpoint, but mostly due to the variety of hardware available.
But it's not the old days anymore, dude. Nowadays, there's things like DirectX and OpenGL and Vulkan. How many times have I said that in this video? The job's already being done for you. Okay, think of it this way. Modern day programming languages like Python or Perl, PHP, SQL, Focus, Link, things like that. All of these languages are just built off of assembly language, which is directly built off of binary. Because, you know, computers only speak in ones and zeros. The reason programmers don't memorize the binary alphabet is because they don't need to. People went out of their way to make other languages that are built off of assembly language a lot more Englishy and easier to do. It's kind of the same thing with developing games. You use an engine that's built off of DirectX, and DirectX is the translator of your engine to the hardware. It's like the assembly language Python was built off of to translate directly into binary. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a lot easier than you think. This is why indie developers are starting to make their own games, because they don't need anyone else's help. It's that easy.
Again, this video is not about which one is better and what not. What I'm trying to convey here is why consoles are still the best choice for developers.
So basically for developers, console's better than PC. So in a way, this video is technically saying that console's better than PC, but you're targeting a different audience. But even then, you're still wrong, because developers, even if they try to choose the quote-unquote easy way, which is consoles, they're still limited by the shitty hardware that consoles possess. And that's not saying that consoles are easier to develop for, because they aren't. Especially once you consider the legal document work that has to go behind the scenes in order to get the game on console in the first place. All things considered, it's pretty easy to make a game for PC, especially if you code for a specific interpreter like DirectX or Vulkan or OpenGL. You get the drill.
The idea of having a dedicated system that you can play games pretty much helps the most important part of the gaming industry, which are the developers. And
any way you consider it, having the same uniform hardware is a bad thing. Consider this, you buy a $300 console, and that console has the same hardware in it as every other $300 console made by that company. That means everyone's going to have a pretty shit experience, either by graphics or performance, without any way to change it. Now say there's a beastly new generation that comes out that costs, so I don't know, $700. Now you can choose between the shitty $300 console or the super expensive but super beastly $700 console. But what if you don't want to shell out that much money? Well, then there would need to be a $500 console or a $400 console. But that's not very uniform now, is it? See, that's the good thing about having the ability to customize your own hardware. You get to pick what you want to be able to play at the price that you choose to pay, and at the performance and power level you're ready to deal with. Now, just because the consumer has access to so much hardware, that doesn't make the developer's job any harder. Again, that's what interpreter softwares are for.
also the indie developers, which is a growing community. And to understand this is crucial for anybody that maybe one day want to make games.
If I ever want to make a game, you can have my word that I never want to make a game for consoles, simply because I don't want to go through the blood work of going through a corporation and contracts and other bullshit in order to have my game released on a platform that I can easily just release on, like, for example, Steam or itch.io. And me, being an indie developer and probably very short-staffed, I probably don't want to have to go through the trouble of making a whole custom engine to make a quick game. That's where pre-built engines come into play, like Unity, Unreal, fucking Game Maker, Source. And those engines already have an interpreter software to communicate with hardware across all spectrums. So basically, I don't have to worry about that as a developer. Overall, it's just easier to make a game for PC. Hell, you can use Game Maker. I mean, you really can't get any more simple than Game Maker.
But what is the problem? There are a lot of limitations in terms of consoles. Yes, they solve the graphic cards problem, but
which you could easily solve by using DirectX with your engine. Consoles are not the only solution, you know.
But they have their own. Computers are not just a gaming platform, they are more than that. And consoles, for instance, can't do what most computers can. You can't use Office on a console or Adobe Premiere or Photoshop or whatever.
Photoshop.
Consoles are consoles and game is what they do. However, keep in mind that the reasons they do not do any of that is because companies sell them as gaming consoles and not as computers or whatever. But with Project Scorpio on the way, that might change a bit, because it seems that the price tag for Scorpio will be way above the usual $400 mark, with some sources suggesting that the price to be over $800.
This video was made in May, so please excuse any outdated information you might have. For your information, it is now $500, just in case you still haven't been bombarded with the Xbox One X videos that have come out every single day since it's been announced. Oh, by the way, Xbox One X is a terrible name. Have I said that before? Well, now I'm saying it again. Fucking terrible name.
What does that mean? Well, for once, and this is my speculation, is that Microsoft is trying to push consoles to be more than just gaming and Netflix machine. I know that is something that I would do eventually if I was in charge of the company, but hey, I'm not. Don't need to remind me in the comments. But I think it would be nice to buy a machine that can become some sort of computer whenever you're not playing a game.
So basically a computer. How much would you charge for this machine? Because most of the time people already have a computer in their house if they own a console. Now, it may not be the best gaming computer on the market, but at least it can do their taxes and their homework. You need that shit for your console too?
That would actually become the wet dream for developers.
So you're telling me that if consoles were turned into PCs basically, except for the fact that you couldn't change out its hardware, that developers would cream their jeans over it? First of all, if a console turns into a PC, there is no use for consoles anymore. That shit's out of the window. If people wanted to do their taxes on their console, they might as well just buy a gaming rig, since, of course, the gaming rig's gonna outperform that console PC hybrid abomination. That, and I'll say it 1,000,001 times more, coding for PC is not hard, especially if you know what DirectX does.
That would actually become the wet dream for developers, because you can pretty much develop way more than just games for it.
But why do that when there's already shit on the PC for that? Why redevelop software?
After all, I've met a lot of people that use their computers as if it was a console.
What do you mean by that? As if it was only used for gaming, you mean? Because, yeah, people use their PCs, kind of like consoles, to just play video games, because a gaming PC does everything a gaming console can do, and better.
So if Scorpio offers to be all in one package, I think it would be a nice move by Microsoft.
No, not really. They just turn into Alienware's little brother. And people are going to build their own PCs anyway, so why bother just selling another pre-built PC? I mean, sure, you could sell it for ease of use, but everyone already knows that it only takes about an hour or less to build a computer. And if that doesn't sell you on it, then just imagine saving hundreds of dollars just by putting in 1 hour's effort of building a PC. So be lazy and pay more, or put in an hour's effort and pay less.
Another thing that I wanted to mention is piracy.
Right, okay. I haven't talked about this in a while.
Ever since the beginning of time, if there is one problem that developers face with computers, is piracy.
So, piracy. Here are my views on it, okay? Piracy, by the books, is illegal. You are not allowed to play a video game that you have not paid for. That is against the law, and I do not condone doing that. However, I strongly believe that piracy does not lead to a lost sale. A lot of the time, people use piracy as a means to play the game as a demo. or just simply because they don't have the money to do so. However, they might be impatient, pirate the game, play it until they get money to buy it, and then buy the legit copy. Now, for those of you who are wondering, well, if you've pirated the game, why buy it? You already have the game, don't you? Well, it's a lot more complicated than that, because piracy has a lot more issues than just buying the game legit. First of all, you have all the rights of owning the game if you just buy the game. You're entitled to all the auto updates, you're entitled to installing the game on however many computers you want. You're basically free to do with the game whatever you want to as long as it doesn't break the specific terms of service. A lot of people will just buy the legit copy simply because it's easier to buy the legit copy. That, and you face less problems, less bugs, less glitches, because more often than not, the pirated version is going to be outdated or not have any multiplayer features. Especially since games on the PC aren't that expensive anyway. Gamers will usually just buy the game, one, for the ease of use, and two, for the security of knowing that it's their legitimate copy of the game that they bought with legit money. The vast majority of PC gamers are just that, gamers. We love and take pride in our hobby, which is gaming, and we love the gaming industry, which, by the way, we use to justify making videos about how shitty it is to pay for online, or to pay for microtransactions. As you can tell, a large portion of the PC gaming community is very passionate about the gaming industry and doesn't want to see it turn to shit. Now, I can't speak for everyone as much as I'd like to, because there are assholes out there. There are just straight up hoodlums out there. But there's nothing we can do about that. And just because they exist doesn't mean developers should completely ignore PC, because it is a profitable market. I mean, businessmen still operate in today's society, right? Even though there's a bunch of hoodlums out there. I can't imagine how much they've made in just the past month. God, they must be super brave. Anyway, the main takeaway from this is 1. Not every PC gamer pirates. In fact, the vast minority of gamers pirate. 2. Piracy isn't exactly a lost sale, since usually most pirates are going to buy the game afterwards. And 3. Well, I'll let you say it.
Although you can still pirate console games.
Yep, you can pirate console games too. So overall, if there's a risk of piracy on PC and there's a risk of piracy on console, then why is it that developers still make games for consoles? Why shouldn't they just stop making games if there's a risk of their product getting stolen? The reason why is they know that the majority of gamers on both platforms pay for their games. How do they know this? Well, first of all, there's some really dumbass gamers out there who are going to pre-order every single game by EA. Not to mention the other shitty corporations. And 2, there's a bunch of bad business practices that they'll use to get every single dime out of your pocket. And number 3, I think, is the most obvious. They're still in business. And as I mentioned before, they're still making loads of money. So here's the dealio. The PC market is profitable, the console market is profitable. That said, why would developers stop making games for either platform?
Although you can still pirate console games, I still think that they can control that way more than PC.
Except for insane DRMs and CD keys that people bitch about all the time. The quite frankly invasive anti-piracy measures some games take to make sure that they're not being pirated. There's a lot of attempts at control going on PC. It's even against the law. But with that said, there's also a community of gamers on console that are easily able to pirate video games on console because of the CD key that doesn't exist, or the invisible DRMs. That actually makes it quite easy to burn a game to a disk and give it to your friend or something, or to clone your hard drive. Piracy exists on both platforms, and saying that it happens more on PC than it does on console does not help the console industry. When you divert attention from one side of the equation to the other, even though you know piracy is an issue on your side of the equation as well, and you just say, oh, but PC doesn't know how to control it, well, that's quite disingenuous, don't you think? Especially since PC is doing way more to prevent piracy than console ever tried to do.
But PCs unfortunately don't offer much solution to that problem. Even though most games now you have to have an account, but it's really easy to bypass that.
It's easy to clone a hard drive, it's easy to clone a disk. In fact, if you know what you're doing, you can do what the last generation did and JTAG your Xbox and download torrents. PC's having a lot of anti-piracy measures taken up, and it's kind of annoying to a lot of gamers, especially when you buy a hard copy of a game. Oh boy, does that shit irritate me nowadays. No wonder literally everyone who's playing on PC plays digitally now. With, guess what, some even more insane DRM, like the fact that Steam libraries are not able to trade games. I mean, you could use family sharing, but if that account is banned for doing something shady, then you can't family share anymore. I mean, think about it, there's a lot of anti-piracy measures taking up on PC. And there's really nothing for consoles. Except for people like yourself who vouch for the console gamers like, oh, they would never pirate. Oh, piracy happens on PC, what are you talking about? It's controlled better on console.
After all, if you go to any third world country where people cannot afford a full price tag, piracy unfortunately is the way to go.
Hey, guess why a lot of developers don't make a lot of their games available to third world countries? You guessed it, piracy. I mean, it's pretty smart to market only to the first world countries that you know have money, and ignore the other people who don't even have a computer. And hey, guess what that leads to? Even though it's a third world country, there are still people in there that would like to buy the game. So guess what happens? They pirate it because it's not available in their country. So if they just opened up their game to that country, available for purchase to those who want to buy it, they could be making some extra monies. Because then there would be less of a reason to pirate that game. And even if you don't market to that country, well, there's still going to be pirates that want the game anyway, so instead of buying it, which is potentially a sale, you're going to get 100% piracy rates in that country because there's nobody in that country that can buy it legitimately. I also want to quickly bring up the topic switch that you just did. You just accused PC of not having any control over their piracy, but then you just brought up third world countries out of the blue which aren't even being marketed to anyway, which of course leads to 100% piracy rates in that country. All in all, it seems like you tried to support the lack of control on piracy on PC with third world countries, which made no sense.
Consoles, on the other hand, have been doing a much better job in terms of fighting piracy, and for developers, that is key.
So PC has CD keys, third-party distributor DRMs, among other anti-piracy programs installed with many games, some of which can be quite intrusive. Or you can be like GTA 4 and have Secure ROM launcher and not even allow legit buyers to use the game without contacting Rockstar support. It got so bad that in order to play that game on PC, I ended up having to crack it anyway. But I bought the game, so that's legit. I want to play the game that I bought. Anyway, on console, there's jack shit. Sure, you've got Microsoft handing out bans every once in a while for piracy or whatever. But hey, guess how easy it is to evade those bans. Pay Microsoft $60 more for a new account with gold on it and you're good to go.
It really hurts to see your hard work being pirated around the world, but it's still good to know that you have fans. The idea is to make original products more appealing to the audience, and in a way that is what I think they have been trying to do with pre-order stuff, exclusive content and whatnot.
Are you seriously gonna defend pre-orders and exclusive bonuses?
But I have to say that they are not having that much of success.
Damn right, 'cause gamers, well, PC gamers I should say, are very loud and protest this kind of behavior. We on the PC hate pre-orders and exclusive deals, especially if it's an obvious paywall or cut content. In fact, with some shitty business deals that tried to happen on PC, like the Payday 2 loot box system, or Skyrim paid mods, or Bethesda Creator Studio, or whatever that shitty modding system is. And even the fiasco where Take-Two sued the creators of OpenIV for modding their game. PC gamers are very outspoken against issues like this, and they are going to defend their hobby and going to defend their gaming industry. And this backs up my point even more about the integrity of the PC gaming community. We love the gaming industry, we love our hobby, so why would the majority of us pirate? But that's going off on a tangent. You get my point.
So even though PCs are better for gaming in general, for developers they offer more headaches than anything else, and that is why consoles are still the best choice for developers.
But they're not, and I gave a bunch of reasons why.
So it makes sense for Microsoft to make a push on their next generation to unite the best of both worlds, and this is one of the things that makes me more interested in acquiring an Xbox Scorpio.
Well, newsflash, that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. At least with the Xbox Scorpio.
I think the idea of not just buying a console but an overall PC that is dedicated game machine would be awesome. And yes, there are some companies that offer such PCs for a while now, like Alienware, Dell, or even Steam was going to go with the Steam machines and all. But I gotta say to you, I have never heard of anybody that actually got a Steam machine.
Well, I haven't heard of any PC gamer who got the Steam machine because the Steam machine is basically a PC that is trying to lure in console gamers. It was supposed to have that family experience in the living room that consoles are all about. But if you already had a PC, well, why would you want to buy that? And a big reason why it didn't lure in a bunch of console gamers was because there were so many different models. There was so many different sets of hardware to choose from. And that scared console gamers a little bit because they didn't know what to look for. Because that's what happens when you're sheltered in the gaming industry. You have no clue what technology you're running. And that's how Microsoft can get away with saying things like, oh, the Scorpio can do 6 teraflops. As if that matters at all. But anyone who doesn't know what a teraflop is going to run with that and say, oh, this is the best thing ever. So all in all, it really benefits the gamers to know what's in their machines. So more hardware is better for the consumer, right? Oh, and before you say it's a headache for the developer again, let me remind you, DirectX is a thing, and so is OpenGL and Vulkan. Have I said that enough times throughout this video?
But I heard of people that actually bought the controller and they were very disappointed.
Well, yeah, the design of the controller wasn't all that impressive. I mean, to me, it sure beats using a thumbstick, but it's still not impressive, and I would much rather use a mouse and keyboard, and so would many other PC gamers. Then on the other hand, you've got console gamers complaining about the controller because it feels weird to them, but then again, any controller that isn't their own confuses them as well, so I think they're just too scared or too lazy to try something new.
To me, it makes sense that Microsoft may be trying to do such thing because after all, they have the Windows Store. So
the Windows Store. God, I haven't heard that name in so long. That's like Games for Windows Live version 2. It's just as shitty.
So the idea is that they might push gamers to substitute their machines with consoles.
So substitute their own personal customized rig that is most likely more powerful than that console for a personalized console. So basically trade in their own custom PC that they've probably built and added their own flair to and probably spent a bunch of money on. And you're going to trade that for a weaker machine that can do basically the same thing your PC was able to do. Why? You're kind of reaching there, buddy. And to me, that sounds like a horrible idea. Do you know how much control Microsoft would have over the gaming community if that was allowed to happen? Jesus Christ, I couldn't even imagine.
Because after all, they can have their games and also the apps all in one machine. But this is all just speculations.
Yeah, and let that idea die right now because it is not good for consumers.
So in the end of the day, there are many reasons why consoles are more appealing to the developer, and that falls down onto the variety of aspects of the PC industry, which was also the problem of the mobile industry.
First of all, I've shown you reasons why that's not the case, and secondly, you're really gonna go talk about phones now?
So like for instance, back in the day, there were way too many phones. I remember not being satisfied at all with the stuff that they offered. It was like, hey, for a few dollars more, you can get a camera on your phone, and for a few dollars more, you can get colored screen.
Did that really bother you? Gee, to me it sounds like you get what you pay for, and if you want to spend less money, you get less. That sounds like a good consumer decision. It's a decision that you alone can make as a consumer based on what you want from that phone, just like a PC.
I mean, it was a disaster.
Oh, please. Guess what the solution to that disaster did? Nowadays, people can't even buy those cheap phones anymore because the market's just cluttered with $100 phones. Or more. Look at that. Just because you were too afraid to make a decision about what you wanted to buy on a phone, now nobody gets that choice. Please spare the gaming industry, okay? We'd like our consumer freedom.
So to me, if consoles become some sort of all-in-one type of computer, I think that would justify the high price of it.
Yeah, because you're too incompetent and lazy to make your own decision about what you want in a computer. This, gentlemen, is what we would call a dumbass consumer.
But if it will be successful or not, that is something that we can only speculate.
It's not gonna work because the pro-consumerist attitude that people on PC have is not gonna let that work.
But then again, nobody will listen to me anyway. This was Dr. X, and I'm out of here.
Yeah, I hope to God nobody listens to you. You sound like the worst business associate ever. You say that just because the consumer has variety, it means that the manufacturers, and in this case it would be the developers, have a headache to deal with because the damn consumers just want options. When in all reality, we shouldn't give a shit about corporations or manufacturers or even developers. We should give a shit about our wallet. And those developers and companies and other corporations should be giving a shit about us, not the other way around. If they want our money, they're gonna have to earn it. Now, I was expecting this video to be 100% about gaming, but then we went into economics and business. Oh, and then piracy. Haven't talked about that in a while. Anyway, I think what we talked about in this video was well worth the wait. I know I'm editing this video right before I'm uploading it. I should have uploaded this on Sunday, but I just had no time to do it over the weekend. I was super busy. This has been one of my longer videos. I don't think I've released a video of over 30 minutes in, God, weeks. So I hope this kind of made up for that. As always, the Discord is still public and open to anyone that wants to join and have a chit with me or fellow gamers. The link is on my channel page up at the top right. With that said, there's really nothing more to say. I thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.